Smokes from Guns Marshal Matt Dillon and Miss Kitty are one of Hollywood's most famous on-screen couples, but many are still upset that they never got to make things right. Official. What really got people's attention was the subtle but clear tension between Matt Dillon and Miss Kitty. Since Miss Kitty's last appearance on Gunsmoke was in 1974, it's impressive that almost 50 years later both old and new fans are still tuning in and talking about the answers to those questions. You might be surprised to hear the answer from James Arness himself, so let's dive deep and find out what really happened. Gunsmoke started out as a radio show in 1952. When they planned to make it into a TV show, they needed to find someone to protect Dodge City. Luckily, it seemed like James Arness, who was 32 at the time, was the perfect person for the job. John Wayne really liked him for the part, and he beat out a lot of other people, including William Conrad, who was the voice of Marshal Matt Dillon on the radio show, standing tall at 6 feet. 7. And James Arness was the perfect person to bring a number of different stories to life. He really understood how hard life was because he had been through it himself as a W-2 veteran. Basically, the studio and writers wanted someone who could do it. He was definitely tough enough to handle the agony. Gunsmoke the Marshal went through gunfire, beatings, stabbings, and even got poisoned once. This role was perfectly right for James Arness, and he didn't have to change much to play it. Amy Stock, who worked with him on 4 Gunsmoke movies, said that the Marshal could easily switch from being off-duty to being on screen. She remembered that the first time she saw him, he was wearing a Dillon hat, a coat, and tennis shoes. He was sitting in his chair, still in his tennis shoes, when the filmmakers told him they were ready for him on set. He then took off his tennis shoes and put on his cowboy boots. He went straight to his horse and became Matt Dillon. She said he was the perfect fit for the role. When Amanda Blake got the part in the Western TV show, she was in her mid-20s when she got the part of Miss Kitty on Gunsmoke. She was very excited and worked hard to get it. She was grateful to share the screen with James Arness, who played Marshal Matt Dillon. Fans quickly fell in love with Amanda's portrayal of Miss Kitty, the owner of the local saloon in Dodge City. Her looks really shone when the show switched from black and white to color in its 1966 season, which was about halfway through its run. Gunsmoke started airing in 1955 and ran until 1975, for a total of 20 seasons. James Arness played Matt Dillon for all 20 seasons, whereas Amanda Blake finished her role as Miss Kitty in the 19th season of the show. The writers didn't go into great detail about Matt and Miss Kitty's relationship, but it was clear that there was something more going on between them. Jim Arness was born on May 26, 1923, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He started his impressive career as a radio announcer in Minnesota in 1945. After moving to Los Angeles, he started to get noticed in the film industry. His big break came in 1947 when he got a role next to Loretta Young in The Farmer's Daughter. That same year, he also got roles in a bunch of westerns. He appeared in the classic sci-fi movie The Thing in 1951, which really helped his career in the early 50s. Jim got a deal with the production business BAT owned by John Wayne. Jack worked on 4 movies with Wayne during his 3 years there. In fact, John Wayne gave Jim his biggest break in 1955 by casting him as Marshal Matt Dillon in the new TV series Gunsmoke. The story goes that CBS wanted Wayne for the role when they were moving the show from radio to TV, but he turned it down and suggested Jim instead. Instead of Jim, CBS decided to give him a chance along with 25 other people, including Raymond Burr, who was chosen to play Dillon. Jim wasn't sure if he wanted to get into TV, but he did. He stayed with Gunsmoke for 20 years and got 3 Emmy nominations before the show ended in 1975, making it the longest-running dramatic series ever. He also starred in 4 Gunsmoke TV movies, the last one being Gunsmoke Ivor: The Long Ride, which came out in 1992 after Gunsmoke. From 1976 until 1979, Jim kept trying to get parts in TV westerns. How the West Was Won is thought to be one of the best miniseries ever. His last TV show was a police drama called Big Jim Lan, which aired in the early 80s before becoming Hollywood famous. James Arness had quite the journey as a soldier in the U.S. Army. He racked up some serious honors, including the Bronze Star, the Combat Infantryman Badge, and a Purple Heart, among others. It's impressive considering he initially wanted to join the Navy as a fighter pilot but got turned away because he was too tall. The Army made good use of his height though when he landed at Anzio Beach Head in Italy on January 22, 1944. They sent him First off the landing craft to check the water's depth. Just 10 days after arriving, he was in the thick of some brutal battles on a pitch-black night on February 1, 1944. While sneaking through a vineyard, he heard voices and a scream followed by a fierce firefight. He took some heavy machine gun fire that shattered his lower leg, and a nearby concussion grenade tossed him in the air as bullets flew around. The soldiers managed to win the battle, but Arness was left with serious injuries that led to multiple surgeries back in the U.S. to fix his leg. After being honorably discharged on January 29, 1945, he signed up at Beloit College and worked as a radio announcer, which set him on an unexpected path into entertainment. He hitchhiked to Hollywood in search of acting gigs and quickly became friends with John Wayne. When the role of Matt Dillon opened up, Wayne gave him a nudge, and that's how Arness became a household name as U.S. Marshal Matt. In the episode Gunsmoke Kitty, Dillon played a character that was very fair and caring and followed the rules. Russell was all about love, not drama. Amanda Blake, who played her, was just like that in real life. She put her heart and everything into her work and her love of saving dogs and cats. Amanda Blake was born Beverly Louise Neal in Buffalo on February 20, 1929. She was the only child of Jesse and Louise Neal. She had some English and Scottish ancestry and could trace her. Kate Barry was a hero in the Revolutionary War who helped warn patriots about the British and played a part in their triumph at the Battle of Cowpens. This was a huge matter for the win at Yorktown when she was in high school. Beverly and her family moved to Claremont, California. She finished high school there and then went to Pomona College. While she was there, she got really into community theater, which started to take over her life. In the 1940s, she dove deep into acting, performing in summer stock productions in New England and taking part in theater and radio gigs back in Buffalo to keep her dreams alive. She worked as a telephone operator while chasing her acting dreams. Eventually, Beverly made her way to Hollywood after being discovered by MGM. The studio had big plans for her and dubbed her the next Greer Garson, who was a big box office hit in the 1940s. She officially changed her name from Beverly Neal to Amanda Blake to make it more memorable. Amanda's first job was in the movie Stars in My Crown. In the early 1950s, she got more than a dozen movie and TV roles, but her big break came in 1955 when she got the part of Miss Kitty Russell, the owner of the Long Branch Saloon in Dodge City. She starred with a then-unknown James Arness, played Marshal Matt Dillon for the next 19 years, and they made one of the most popular Western TV shows of all time. Blake once said that being on the set of Gunsmoke felt like being with family. After her first divorce in 1956, she spent a lot of time on set, even on her days off, because it made her feel like she belonged. She didn't make many movies between 1955 and 1974, but she did make a lot of guest appearances on shows like Alfred Hitchcock Presents and The Red Skelton Show. The Dean Martin comedy Roasts, Match Game, and The Love Boat all came out in 1964. She was married that year. She married Jason Seymour for the second time, but they divorced in 1967. Then she married Frank Gilbert for the third time in 1967 and stayed with him until 1982. Since both characters were so likable, it made sense that viewers would think there was a romance brewing. But the romantic vibe between them was more than just fan speculation. Let's talk more about Miss Kitty and what some fans think is the possible reason why the couple never went official. She dressed in flashy outfits and served drinks to rowdy cowboys who often had too much to drink. Plus, she was always ready to offer wise advice and listen to their stories about cowboy life. This definitely doesn't sound like what you'd expect from a Sunday school teacher in 1955. It's not how a proper lady was supposed to act in the Wild West. Miss Kitty even kept a stash of shotguns behind her bar. She was a bold pioneer woman who was much more interesting than most. She was in charge of hiring and firing her waitstaff. The girls she hired were younger and a little more daring than she was. The cowboys were tough, rugged, and a little wild, and they were looking for more than just drinks and conversation after coming in from the cattle. Kitty and Matt clearly had a close connection, but they never expressed any public affection. The writers and producers of the show made this choice because they wanted chemistry. Arness was an excellent lawman because he was a terrific shot and could handle a huge horse. Instead of over-the-top displays of love and emotion between the characters, he was a good peacekeeper. Maybe Matt wasn't the best husband, but if he and Miss Kitty loved each other so much, why didn't they get married after 20 years? Was Matt embarrassed by Kitty? She spoke her mind and could drink and shoot with the toughest men. Maybe Dillon just wanted a wife who was more of a traditional homebody type. However, James Arness shared some thoughts on why Kitty and Matt never really got together in Gunsmoke in his autobiography. He talked about how fans often wondered about Matt Dillon's relationship with Kitty and why it never took off. Matt Dillon's relationship with Kitty and why it never seemed to go anywhere beyond the romance between us. Amanda Blake was very clear that no one should mess with her character. Arness made it clear that the whole thing about their relationship was more about the producer's choice than anything else. He said that going a step further would make things more complicated and might even make the show less popular. Arness suggested that keeping the relationship subtle and a little mysterious could be better for the viewers, even if they didn't see it that way. He added that they downplayed their relationship because they thought it would be more exciting to leave things to the viewer's imagination. Even though Arness and Amanda Blake were only friends, it was clear that they loved each other behind the scenes of the show. Arness applauded the casting of Blake as Russell and said she was an example of the great casting that made the show so popular. Aries also called Blake a great actress and a good friend. One reason that came up a lot in conversations was that a lawman could make enemies, and being known as Matt Dillon's girlfriend could put Kitty in danger. So what was the nature of their relationship? Jim Burns, who wrote 34 of the show's best episodes, remembers that they kept things subtle. He said this after the fade out. There was an unspoken agreement that once the Long Branch closed and Matt Dillon put up the closed for the night sign, he would go over to the Long Branch and go upstairs. But we never saw that happen. Instead, they flirted, teased, hugged, and walked away with their arms around each other, but they never kissed. James Arness was sure that the show's creators purposefully left the relationship between Matt and Kitty unclear. They didn't want to change the show's core nature or the characters too much. This strategy seemed to work, as they got a lot of fan mail asking for more romantic development between the two. The producers wanted to keep viewers interested and wondering, so they kept this level of tension throughout the series. He thinks this method worked very well, whereas Gunsmoke's writers were not going to marry off Matt and Kitty knew that tensions would rise as would in Season 5's Kitty's Outlaw. Anley is a nasty man from Kitty's past who challenges her devotion to Matt. In Season 8, Claudanes makes time for Kitty when Matt doesn't, while in Cotter's Girl in Season 1, Matt tries to aid orphan Mariette Harley and ends up being the object of her strong feelings. 12 Sarah is in Frances, a woman Matt used to adore. Now she runs a way station for criminals and is anxious to get Matt back. In Season 15, Kitty sees Matt shot for the 11th time and can't take it anymore. She puts the Long Branch up for safe, moves to another town and starts a business with Beverly Garland. In 1973, the relationship between Matt and Kitty seemed to change. Miss Michael Learned is known for her role in a narrative when Matt loses his memory. The Waltons play a love interest for him. Their relationship grows, and they kiss, which is rare for Matt. But when Matt gets his memory back, he goes back to Miss Kitty. Interestingly, this story continued 17 years later in a TV movie. Miss Larne's character and Matt have a child together who is kidnapped. Matt searches for his child with the help of another character. In a twist, the other character says he wants to marry Miss Larne's character, which is similar to the romantic tension between Matt and Kitty earlier in the show and in one of the later seasons. During a stagecoach robbery, Miss Kitty meets a man who was hurt while protecting her. This man asks her to marry him, which leads to a deep talk with Matt. Kitty tells Matt how much she cares about him and how long they've known each other. She wonders if their connection may grow into something more, but in the end, she knows that their position has its limits. Matt admits how he feels, but he unexpectedly lets Kitty make the choice herself. That season was Amanda Blake's last as Miss Kitty. She was now living in Arizona and married, and the long trip became more and more difficult for her. She and producer John Mantley often argued, mostly about Blake's costumes. Miss Kitty was always supposed to look classy, but Mantley hadn't set aside any money for Blake's new clothes in years. When she insisted on getting new clothes before continuing, Mantley told her to go. He would later admit it was the biggest mistake. "I didn't just make it once." James had something to say on the subject. Amanda Blake says Amanda did too. The people who made Gunsmoke on purpose didn't include any romantic plotlines between Matt Dillon and Miss Kitty. They thought that introducing romance would ruin the Western vibe of the show and turn off some viewers. Blake made fun of the classic Western cliché that heroes care more about their horses than women. Convincing everyone that Dillon loved Kitty much more than he loved his horse, she said that Gunsmoke was made to appeal to a wide spectrum of people by exploiting the charm of the Old West to connect with people of all ages. There wasn't much potential for romance because the focus was on historical elements. Blake told people to think about how romantic Kitty and the Marshal could be because the show didn't really portray any romantic moments. The show ended after one more season in 1979. Arness kept acting in How the West was the police drama. McLean's Law was one of the shows he was in, and he played Jim Bowie in the TV movie The Alamo 13 Days to Glory, but the Gunsmoke family got back together in 1987, and John Mantley brought Amanda back for the first TV movie. Jim Burns wrote Gunsmoke again.